secrets of anti-gravity propulsion and sub-quantum kinetics. These are both ideas that I learned from Paul A. LaViolette in his book called The Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion and his theories on sub-quantum kinetics. And the book, I believe I first read it in 2007.
What's up?
Welcome, Vlad. How you doing?
Doing all right. Just washing some clothes right now. What about you? How's your day?
Pretty good, man. I went to a LARP event earlier today. LARP, LARPing. Do you know about LARPing?
What is that?
No?
No.
It's live action role playing. So it's kind of, people dressing up in medieval outfits and.
Oh, that kind. Okay. Well, over here they just call it medieval, Renaissance medieval, but I didn't know.
Well, there's stuff like that, but this one is a sort of a combat one because we actually use shields and weapons, and so we're going into combat, beating each other down with the weapons. So. So you said you're doing your laundry now, huh?
Well,
that's cool, man.
It's just, I said, check it out. I should have been doing this last night, but I got a little bit lazy, and I said, what, fuck it.
Yeah, Vlad, you should have been.
So what happened to your friend, Sarah?
What do you mean, what happened?
No, I thought you guys were getting together today to continue.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we were going to do another reading of Edgar Allan Poe. I forget exactly which story she was going to read, but it's a popular one. But she was having, I've been talking to her on and off throughout the day. She's been having some difficulties with her phone just recently. Her phone just died. I was actually on Clubhouse with her, and I was doing my neuroscience news reading for World Reading Club, and I read 3 articles. And then she was on one of them, the first one. She came to the end, and I talked to her for a minute, and then her phone died. So she's been texting me through Call-In.
I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of doing laundry.
Yeah, neither am I, but I don't mind it because
I'm still very extremely sexist about it. I still believe women are supposed to be doing this kind of shit. You know what I mean?
Wow, Vladdy. No, I don't know what you mean.
I'm old fashioned and I don't change for anyone,
Well, listen, I'm going to tell you a little story to sum up my ideas about that. So one day, and it's an internet story, but I was.
Go ahead. Sorry, I have the TV loud. Just got back into the room. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was trying to interpret the Spanish that I was hearing, but it's pretty loud though, Vladdy. Hey, so listen, I was I was losing my train of thought by being distracted by.
I had just told you that
your laundromat shenanigans.
The one doing the laundry, the clothes, washing the clothes.
Oh, right. Yes, sir. Thank you very much. An internet story I have for you about how I feel about what you just said. So I was on Instagram. By the way, everyone, I'm at UniquilibriuM on Instagram as well, just like I am here on Wisdom. And I was scrolling through different videos, and some people were doing live videos on there. They still do, of course, and they were posting their podcast. And I was looking at one video podcast on there, and there were some nice ladies who were hosting the show, and they had some guests on there, and they were talking about things like this. And this guy was going off about, yeah, man, if a woman don't cook or clean or wash clothes and nothing like that, I don't know what she bringing to the table. What's she bringing to the table? And I was like, man. That's what
I hear that, brother. I hear that, brother, but without the nasty.
Listen, I'm not.
Let me tell you, Hakeem.
Hold on.
Kevin Samuel.
Listen, wait, I didn't finish telling my story, though. Hold on. So I heard that, right? And then I like, it just really hit me. It was, people talk about being triggered, and I went on there and I was like, hey man, what's going on with this? I was like, that's not. I was like, is that really how you think right now? I was like, that doesn't compute with me. I said, I don't get that. I was like, I thought that you're saying that women, if they don't cook or clean or wash the clothes and stuff like that, then what good are they? I thought that was kind of ridiculous, but
They're useless. They're utterly
wow.
useless. Kevin Simon said it straight out.
You
If
know,
you have the money,
do you believe
if you
that?
got the money, I do believe that. What does a woman have to
Okay.
offer other than modern day women now nothing but stupid feminist bullshit? They want a traditional man, but they don't want to be traditional. They don't want to pop out kids. They don't even want to have kids because they don't want to ruin their body. They don't want the feminine role the man expects. They don't know that you got to dress up. You got to be feminine to be attractive to your man. You got to keep your weight down. Otherwise, your man leaves for another woman. Those are things that are realistic, my friend. Those are not questionable or negotiable shit. That is the straight out truth. Modern day women have triple the work that it did before. Yeah, you might have your PhD that you want. You might have the master's that you want, even two of them. But what you haven't been able to do that you're not successful is get a man. And that was much easier than the school and all that. Much easier. All you had to do was do your part and be a woman and be submissive about it. Something women don't like to be. That's why we have right now the generation, millennials and Generation Z that are failing us. They don't even want to be married. Because when I think like the song says, I don't want a competitive woman, a competitor, like in the movie. I don't want a competitor. If that would have been the case, I would have been gay a long time ago. You know what I mean?
What?
I would have been gay a long time ago. I don't want a buddy man. I don't want a kind of like a woman, kind of like a buddy that determines when we have sex. No, I want a natural feminine woman that desires a man and when expects a man to not only provide, she wants to work, great, as long as there's no children at the beginning, but plays her role, knows her place, and does not come up with all this feminist garbage that American women are. Why do you think a lot of men, I don't know if you noticed this, Hakeem, a lot of our American men from all races, especially white, why do you think they marry a lot of Asian women? Do you think they want to take on all the bullshit from white women, the feminist women that are coming out? Even if they got it all, if they got the package, wow, they're hot looking, but they have this masculine, unfeminine, feminist attitude. Do you think man deserves that shit? That's not right. That's never right. I personally have a trouble with that, and it might take me longer, whatever, even if I have to go abroad to find a woman. I mean, we don't really have this big problem in America with Mexican women.
Wait, Vlad, you're not, you don't have. What do you mean go somewhere else with women? I thought you were. Are you married, or you?
No, what I'm telling you is this is in America. This is a first world problem.
Okay.
Where women don't want to be real women. That's why you're probably seeing now a lot of single professional women that no man would want them. They're probably heartache. They probably had a broken heart, and they got dumped twice or three times, and they said, I had it. Why? Because of this very problem, Hakeem. Feminism. Feminism is a poison to our nation. That's not a plus. It's a negative, a very big negative. It's very sad. A lot of people don't see it. They just,
really?
Okay, we got to be equal. No, that's not being equal. You're turning the tables hard, going from patriarchy to matriarchal. That's why they attack the white men that are, very rich, the 1%, privilege, all this, which is very few, a small percent. Now, that's not the whole nation. And they come in, the way they're coming in right now, that's why a lot of them, they know it they think it's a crisis on our end. No. It's more women per man. It's a crisis on their end. They're not the ones that are being married. Men continue to get married. Men continue to get laid. The problem is not on our end. There's not a manosphere, man crisis bullshit. It's a woman's sphere, woman crisis, because they're not able to get the man that they want. If you were to see the videos on Kevin Samuels, I hope you do there on YouTube, his whole collection, you think different than how you see women right now.
Wait, hold on, Vlad. What videos are you talking about?
Okay, just look in YouTube. Just look into Kevin Samuels. Okay.
Well, that's what I'm asking. You got to slow down. What's his name? Kevin what?
Oh, there's a lot of them. I just want you to just
Vlad. His name.
Kevin Samuels.
Say it more. Samuels. Good. Say it slowly, please. Kevin Samuels.
Kevin Samuels.
Gotcha. That's what I was asking for, Vlad.
Look into him. Check him out. He's gonna come off misogynist. He's gonna come off totally anti whatever you are, if you're pro-feminist, he's gonna slap you around. He's gonna man you up.
I'm not. Listen.
He's gonna man you up.
With
He's gonna show you how
with
to be a man.
Vlad, let me tell you something.
He's gonna slap you around. He's gonna offend you.
Listen, with all
And
that
he's
exists,
extremely judgmental, but you know what? He got the job done. He married people, and that's what matters.
with all that exists, Vlad.
Whatever.
I said, with
Can
all
you raise
that
your
exists.
volume a little bit, please?
Yeah, hold on. I said, with all that exists, I stand apart. Am I still really low? Is my volume really low?
You're good. You're good right there.
Okay. All right. So this gentleman's name is Samuel's what?
Kevin Samuels.
Kevin Samuels.
Kevin Samuels. Check him out on YouTube.
Okay, so
look at all his videos.
Vlad, let me ask you questions here because I need to find out information. So Kevin Samuels, I don't want you to just tell me to look him up. What is he about?
He's an image consultant. He's a graduate from a university, I think, in Texas.
Okay, nobody cares about his credentials, and I don't either. I don't care about his bio. What does he do?
Okay, go ahead. Ask me again.
What does he do? He's an image consultant, and what does that?
He's an image consultant, but he speaks to people. He works with couples, and he works with people in general, and he addresses the cultural problems that we have with men and women. And he talks specifically to, it's a cultural sensitive issue, but not solely only for blacks, because he is black, or he was black. He died back in April. So he talks to a myriad of people, but a lot of what he says is extremely relevant across the board because it's not a black problem.
You're hilarious. You said he was black because he died in April, dude. You're crazy, Vlad. You're on your phone. That's so awesome.
Well, I'm not saying he stopped being black. I said he was.
I know.
Addressing everything. Not that he stopped being black. So sorry, I said it incorrectly. He didn't stop being black. It's just the thing is, he spoke to the black community, but it wasn't only for the black community. It was for all people.
I know what you're saying. It's just that how you said it was funny, bro.
I'm not gonna say if I contradict myself. Sorry. That he stopped being black. He didn't stop being black. He died a black man, obviously.
Right.
But the thing is, I started changing my attitude and my approach towards women. I introduced Kevin Samuels to a friend, and they're having success in their marriages, with their girlfriend. And my nephew, Bonafide, he told me, you up my game. I was already like Kevin Samuels with my white wife because I have a white Mexican nephew who married a Mississippi girl.
Okay.
And she came in with all these masculine traits of a feminine. Very feminine in many ways when they got together, very sexy, she lost weight and all that. But as soon as everything that Kevin Samuels talks about, and when my nephew started hearing Kevin Samuels, it just affirmed what you already knew, reaffirmed. And every friend that I've gotten, for the guy that doesn't even want to try, gets offended, the snowflakes and cowards and beta male, they immediately say, "Oh, how can you think of women?" Oh, shut the hell up! I don't deal with those because those will end up single for the wrong reasons the rest of their life. They'll probably end up getting married with a feminist or something. So what I'm saying is, he's going to insult you. He's not politically correct, and he shouldn't be.
Okay.
But he tells you the truth. And it's going to hurt you. He's going to rattle your cages and ruffle your feathers. Because the way you see women, he's going to show that you've been doing it the wrong way. And if he does touch you and you see all his videos, if you see one or two of his videos, it shows that there's something wrong with you. You're going to recognize it immediately, and you're going to start doing something about it. Go ahead.
Oh, no.
So this is the reason I listen to tough men like this. He wasn't an alpha male. He probably was. I'm not sure. But I listen to him. I listen to Dampener because our country is really sissified right now. The men are all-time low, dude. Lowest testosterone levels ever. It is just so sad how our country is. A lot of first world nations, with all this progressive liberalism, is taking.
I see you there, Chris. Well, I stand apart from almost all the ideas that anybody has about all of this stuff dealing with men and women and gender issues. I don't really have much to say about it because,
Not yet, right?
well, it's just humanity.
You know why
I
I say
mean,
not yet? Hold on. You know why I say not yet? It's because you have not been challenged, my friend. The day you're challenged, you're gonna start
challenge,
seeing who you
challenged
truly
by what?
are.
What does that exactly mean? You mean
When you're challenged to your thinking, it's gonna
challenged
be
how?
when you're challenged to the questions and the topics that Kevin Samuel brings up, you're either gonna be for him
But
or you're
see,
gonna be against
that's
him.
like that sounds like problem, agitate, solve. You're telling me that when I get exposed basically to his thing, his questions, then all of a sudden I'm going to be stirred up.
No.
That's like advertising for,
Well, like I said, not every man is stirred up because they're lined up. They just need to check themselves out where they're at. And some again, some will be
hmm
reaffirming because they've been taught this all their life, and others won't. Others came from a different
yeah,
background and that probably didn't have father and mother together because they were broken up, divorced, death, whatever.
yeah,
And they're gonna have to do a whole change. And this is what I like about Kevin Samuels, that there's one of the reasons he was very critical and he was very controversial because he touched on the problems within the black community, but he knew very well that even though again it was a cultural sensitive topic when he spoke, meaning for his black culture, it
yeah.
really went beyond blacks. It's around across races, across people in all of the United States and different parts of the world. He knows very well that this was a problem, you know,
Well,
and it's still an ongoing
well,
problem. I
Vlad,
mean, he didn't.
I appreciate
Go ahead.
I appreciate your input on this, but I want to ask you a question. Um,
What's fun?
what got you on this idea today? Because yesterday I was, you had me reading over in Callin. I read a really great, interesting Bible verse, which was Genesis 19 about about Lot. That was cool. But I want to know
Yeah,
today,
and the sodomites. Yeah.
and I'm gonna switch you out for a second because I want to talk to my friend Chris here. But what made you think about this today? Because you jumped on here, you were doing your laundry, and then you know, and we started talking about feminism and
Well, like I'll go back to the way I told you at the beginning.
yeah.
I sometimes don't agree in doing laundry. I believe that's the woman's work, and they should get with it.
Oh, right.
That's what I believe. You know, don't get me wrong.
Vlad,
My
you are
mom's care and my
impressive.
respect. Yeah, I'm not your modern day man. I don't cut into that bullshit. I'm original, true man that your father probably was, your grandfather. That's the kind of man I line up with. A lot of
Vlad,
people, believe it or not, Hakeem, I don't
you
say it
impress
against
me.
you. I like you, but there's a lot of people that can't stand me because I'm too real. I'm too in their face. I'm too blunt. I'm too
Yeah.
crass, and I'm an asshole. And I say that as a Christian. I'm an asshole, and I
Well,
recognize that.
everybody who's who they are. So listen, I just want to tell you, I appreciate you because you
Of
went
course, me
from
too. I like you, Hakeem.
yeah, listen, let me say this. Because you went from talking about doing you went from doing your laundry and then saying how you think that women should be doing this kind of thing. And then we went on this whole thing about feminism and everything. And I think that it's amazing that you have such passion and creativity that you can go on about something like that, which is very cool. With that being said, I'm gonna get Chris on here, and Chris is probably more gonna talk to me about what I put the title here: Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion and Subquantum Kinetics.
You got it, man. You
So,
got it.
listen, brother, if you're around, we can do another call later. I'm gonna chat with Chris real quick, but it's always good to
You
see you.
got it.
Yo, because you've been a big support, and everybody, you see Vladdy. He goes by Vlad in another app that we play around in together and have discussions called Call In. And so he's awesome. He came over here to help another friend, and he helped out with a project that I had over here. So Vlad's good people. I appreciate him. We don't agree on everything, but that's what I really love about him. We get to talk about really cool stuff. Um, Chris,
Hey
what's up?
man.
Interstellar Frequency.
Hey man. Good evening. I saw your title and I was like okay, this is let's go there. I'm interested in this anti-gravity propulsion. Do you know much about
Yeah,
Bob
it's
Lazaro at all?
I mean, I know of Bob Lazar, and I know very little about how he he had some insights into like the sport model, it was called, and a new element 115, which eventually was discovered. Um, he, even though he doesn't have very much formal training in physics, he was working on some top secret government projects. I've seen some interviews with him, but not much. I remember those basic like talking points, just like what I just said right now.
Right. In the quantum kinetics behind it, I was hearing. I'm not, like I said, I'm not one that could brandish like history documents, say, okay, this. But I did hear about something where they were doing a acceleration of a gravity particle over in Europe or something like that in a big tube.
Yeah.
Eh,
Well, that's CERN. You know about that, right?
no, can you elaborate on it a little bit?
Well, CERN is a particle accelerator, and basically they use magnets to steer subatomic particles like photons around this track, this 1 mile track underground, and it's underground so that it shields it from other radiation, other photons, and other particles that come from cosmic rays and things like that. And so they use magnets and they start guiding some particles around the track in one direction, and then they guide the other particles in the track around the other direction, and they do their best with these magnets to accelerate them to as close to the speed of light as they can until they get them to have a collision.
Oh wow.
And then when these particles collide at these near speeds of light, it releases the energy within them, which is usually in the form of a shower of all these other different subatomic particles. And they have different particle detectors and different bubble chambers, they call them, that show the scatter patterns and the swirl patterns of different subatomic particles. And of course, they gather images of this and study it. And this is how they discover some of the new smaller subatomic particles and constituents um, ones that we already know, like for example, inside the inside the photons. I mean, inside the proton. Gosh, hold on for a second. Inside the neutrons and the protons,
Right.
there are quarks, and then these quarks are then held together by very uncreatively named gluons because they glue the quarks together in the nucleus of the proton or the neutron, and also glue the protons and neutrons together in the atom. So that's what holds them together, and that's called the strong nuclear force. Those are the gauge bosons or the vector bosons of the strong nuclear force.
Was that
Gluons.
from that study that they were doing there? Is that how we ended up with the I don't know what name of the satellite or whatever it was that they launched, some kind of probe, but it has an engine that's like an ion engine where it's
I don't know, but I know that project is called it's called a Large Hadron Collider. The one in
oh yeah,
Geneva is called CERN, right? So
yeah,
but I'm not sure about what you're talking about with the ion propulsion, but that's been an idea that's been around for like 100 years. It's not new. I mean, and I'm not even exaggerating, I think, about the 100 years thing.
right.
It's just that the technology, like for example, using solar sails or ion sails that are able to make use of the pressure, the ionic wind, so to speak,
Right.
to propel the whatever craft or vessel they have attached to it. Um, and so yeah, those are some of the things that in propulsion that physicists and are looking for, and rocket scientists and whatnot. And uh, there are, I mean, some of the stuff that Bob Lazar was working on supposedly at Area 51. Um, at that time, there were all kinds of projects happening that were going with names like magnetohydrodynamics and electrogravitics and all those different kind of things that so
I wonder
for a
I
while.
wonder if that
Yeah,
actually has anything tied back to the Giza Plateau at all.
Well, I mean, I'm sure that we can find some kind of connection back to the Giza Plateau in that we do know by looking at something like archaeoastronomy. Have you heard of archaeoastronomy?
I'm not sure. I probably know it, but I
You,
don't know the name.
yes, exactly. I was just about to say that you may know it in practice of examples of it, but you may not know the name. And one of them, because you just mentioned the pyramids of Giza, one example is how the Orion's Belt constellation lines up exactly
Right.
with the Pyramid of Giza if you so-called roll back the cosmic clock,
Right.
meaning there's also, because of course we can look at the sky and we see how it moves and we can get a general idea of how fast everything is moving in relation to us and things like parallax and the angles and all of that of how we see things and horizons. And so there's software, one of them which is called Redshift, is a software that you can use to show what the positions of certain stars were in the sky at a certain time. So like you can roll it back 10,000 years and see where the stars were. And
Right.
if you rolled it back like 10,500 years or something like that, the the Orion's Belt constellation is lined up exactly with the three pyramids at Giza.
Wow. With that being said, are you familiar too much about some of the discovery that they found there? That there are some so-called oh gosh, I'm not 100% sure, but there was like some acid type stuff in the water and some like it supposedly might have been actually a ginormous generator of electricity versus an actual tomb like we all thought.
Well, actually, the whole idea of the pyramids being tombs uh, have been reported by many Egyptologists to be an incorrect or not entirely accurate use of the pyramids in the first place. Because in the excavations, you'll find lots of tombs of pharaohs and their servants and many other people in surrounding areas and other smaller burial sites that are around the tombs. And, you know, they call this places the Valley of the Kings and whatnot. But there are very little, if any, uh, royalty or anybody buried in the pyramids. In fact, the pyramids were thought to be by some Egyptologists that they were simply used for different rituals and observation, like um, astronomical and astrological observations.
You know, I actually,
Uh,
if you want to jump on this what if moment for example, it's kind of a fun thought of mine. And I don't know if it will ever be proven true or not, but I had a thought process that it's a possibility like with the planet or the actual pyramid itself was more of a transportation device where it takes physical matter like you and I in the main chamber with all the right tools necessary and then transports you from this location to the other side of the cosmos where the Orion's belt through the Orion's belt or give or take to the other side of the universe, which is kind of a strange thought that came across my mind on that, but it would almost make sense. But why else would the shaft be open in that direction as well as the other direction, and yet this one other direction? You know what I mean?
sure, I don't have any clue why any of these things line up like that, but they're fascinating to me for me to have these little bits of trivia in my mind and to understand, some of the ideas related to them. But there's a gentleman named Scott Onstad. Have you heard of him?
No, I haven't.
And so on YouTube, he created a series of videos called Secrets in Plain Sight. And Secrets in Plain Sight, he's a he's a an I think he's an engineer or an architect, and um, he he uses mathematics a lot for measurements. I believe he's an architect or some high level designer like that. I believe it's architect. architecture though, some type of engineering, civil
Right.
engineering or something like that.
Right. Right.
But either way, he has found angles and lines and ginormous geodesic shapes that connect various ancient sites, specifically monoliths and new and neoliths that we have on the Earth. There are, for example, one example that pops to my mind is the Washington Monument is in the center of what's known as a Vesica Pisces. And a Vesica Pisces is basically um, a symbol of a vagina or the reproductive center of a woman, or actually the vaginal opening.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, and it's and of course the Washington Monument is like a phallus, and the Washington Monument is sitting right in the middle of it. And so Vesica Pisces basically is represented as sort of like a Venn diagram, but
Hmm.
sharing perfect, almost, it looks like an eye in the middle where the circles overlap each other, sort of like that same
Right.
eye shape. It's not quite an oval, but it's pinched off at the end. And um, and then there are different angles around there, like there are giant pentacles and hexagrams and lines that go straight from, like Stonehenge to another site and sites in New York and different places here and there.
So in a
But
way,
he breaks it.
it's almost like a connection. It's like, hey, this is we're still here, and this is what we're doing, and like a
Yeah.
communication type way.
I'll
It,
say
it
that one
would
more
be more
time.
like a communication type way of to the outside, um, or maybe.
Could be. I mean, I don't know about a lot, but it's fascinating because like other things that are encoded into it, like Scott Onstott points out in his video, for example, that the Washington Monument is 555 feet tall. But what's interesting about that is that makes it 6,660 inches. And so there are a whole lot of things where 555 and 666 show up in different measurements of things like that. And that also, if you study it and follow it around, you can find all these other ancient sites connected to it. And so I don't know. It could be some kind of signaling or whatever, and there could be some kind of communication behind it. And there obviously, it seems like there is. I mean,
What's interesting behind that is like the Stonehenge and all these other ancient stuff that's here that was long here before we ever got here, and yet today they're still standing, except for the new stuff that was
yeah,
created here where we're at in the States. But all the rest of the other stuff
well,
though, like pyramids
yeah,
and
there
other
are
stuff.
a lot of ancient sites. Yes, exactly. Isn't that fascinating? How don't you find that amazing how there are a lot of ancient sites that are still standing? I
Yes,
mean,
I
it's fascinating.
I almost think looking at when I was looking at it in a way of a circular circumference of the Earth and the geographical locations of these basically pyramids that have been overgrown by I don't know, Earth and nature per se, but yet they're there. It's almost like it's a ginormous defense mechanism. Not necessarily like a weapon, but a defending shield of the outside. If that
Yeah,
if that
it could
makes any
be.
sense, like depending on the focus of the mind and everyone around, you know, we're still learning the levels of consciousness within the human body
Right.
and the mind.
Well, there's something, yeah, that very well could be. I mean, you never know. There are some interesting things in that, like um, that may be connected. For example, there's a book called Secret Mission. I forget who the two authors are, but I think they're one of the first places besides man, I don't remember the other researcher's name at the moment, but it probably will come to me. But for example, it points out something very interesting about NASA. Uh, NASA, for example, uh, according to these researchers in the book, every single mission. Now, this should be mind-blowing to anybody that hears this. And so I need
I
you to
think I
just
think I
give,
know what you're getting ready to say, but okay.
well, this is pretty mind-blowing information, and maybe you do. So I'm going to say a number, and when I say this number, you're going to know whether or not you know what I'm talking about or not. So the number is 19.5.
Ooh, I've heard that one.
All right, so check this out. This is so you've heard a lot of news and stuff like that lately about the solar flares.
I haven't. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Well, even if you haven't, or even if anybody has not, uh, some of NASA and certain news. I guess maybe I'm plugged into some different shit than people are. I don't know,
And
but
I just get news from a different location. I'm not
right.
I'm not getting news from the average news on media.
And that's exactly the point that I'm making. So that um, that I that there's different sources for news. So maybe I think maybe some of this stuff is in the mainstream. So yeah, uh, you're probably not going to even hear about much of that because the thing is that you have your eyeballs on something completely different because you have your own agenda that has to do with exploration and understanding and mystery and figuring things out. Whereas what I'm talking about with this, all this stuff you're hearing, may have been hearing about solar flares, or some people might have heard about it. It is kind of a fear mongering and just getting people stirred up
Oh yeah.
about, oh, the solar flare can come and knock everything out. Yes, it could. So why are you not teaching people survivalism and showing people how to prepare meals and store seeds and do this? If you're so concerned, like, why is there not some gigantic consortium and organizations all over the world preparing for solar flares for years and years and years and years? So maybe either it's not real and it's just fear mongering, or they don't care about anybody and just are waiting for it to happen so most people will die. But that's
Well,
very
I'm going to
dark and
add something to that,
yeah,
if you don't mind. Because the
sure.
solar flares is a big kind of like a scary notion, because with our magnetic poles of both north and south, its main purpose and job is to protect this host that we're living on, Mother Earth, and everything in it. So therefore, every time the solar flare launches, then the magnetic poles help push that radiation around the Earth, and kind of, it doesn't really affect us. It does, but it doesn't to the extent it messes with the weather system and stuff like that. On the other hand, it's almost as though these solar flares that do happen to break through, they kind of mess with our cell service. They mess with your average um, day-to-day communication on the microwave network, and which is why they're bouncing around repairing the cell towers so much. And there's a lot of work in the cell towers because all of a sudden the node's out and signals gotten pretty bad and weak, and they don't know why or something, right? I had went to an Edison person. Oh my god, I can't believe I just said that. Sorry. I went to an electrician company, and I asked the guys, like, "Hey, you guys are kind of worried about having the lines up on top, right?" You know where I'm going with
Yeah.
this, right?
Oh, I don't. I'm listening very carefully to find out.
I asked the guy, I was like, "Aren't you guys worried about the lines and how the fact that we are shooting this energy down this copper wire that's going so far, and then it kind of has to go through a transformer and gets reboosted power and then shoots it down another direction? Like, why are you guys wasting your time with that? Like, why are you not shooting it down a line of water, which is a 0 ohm connectability? You know, there's no resistance in water whatsoever. It's like as soon as you put electricity to the water, it's all the way through to the other side to reach ground. And one of the guys said, "Well, that costs too much money." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? You know how much money you're going to save on all those damn, you know, power stations set up every direction and all these different circuit locations and stuff like that? if you shoot the electricity down the line inside a conduit with water, maybe not water, maybe some other liquid of something, that's going to save a lot of money, and you're not going to have loss of energy.
The thing is that whether you're, let's just assume that what you're saying is true according to physics, right? That makes too much sense, Chris.
Exactly, because then we don't make any money.
So now, along those lines, because you were talking about that, because of solar flares and the protection from electromagnetic storms and things like that, and how you can send electricity. As I was saying about the sun at 19.5, is that a very fascinating thing about NASA is that every single, according to this book, The Secret Mission, and I forget what the authors are at the moment, and I'm not looking it up because I tend to get distractible. So, but this book points out that every single NASA mission, either the launch site and or the landing site, like on the moon, or even the most recent ones to Mars a couple of years ago, every single time, let's assume this is true. This is why I'm putting emphasis on this. Every single time, the launch and or the landing site of NASA missions have all been at had a constellation of some kind, like Leo, for example, at a 19.5-degree angle from the launch and or landing site. Every single time, a constellation, Chris.
That's
Here's
interesting.
NASA doing missions, even the moon, like every single one, even when every single time they're like, oh, it's behind, or this failed, or this didn't happen at the right time, and all of that. But somehow every single time, even with all the delays and all that, which seem to be a stage play, the launch and or landing sites have all been at 19.5-degree angles in relation to some constellation, like Leo is one of them that I can recall.
So that's
Now,
an acceptance then. That's like a gate code to leave, or
right,
something of a higher existence.
But now listen to this. Here's what's going to tie it all in together with the solar flares and other things like that. So, the highest mountain on Earth is not Mount Everest, as most people would believe just from pop geology, I guess, or pop is,
Culture.
science,
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah, culture. So actually, I think it's called Mauna Kea in Hawaii. That's the tallest from the bottom because it's in the ocean. So from the seafloor to its top, it's the tallest mountain. Now, this wouldn't be significant until you hear the rest of this. It's at 19.5 degrees north of the Earth's equator. Now, you go to Mars, and the largest mountain that has been reported to us and that we know of from all the satellite images is called Olympus Mons. And Olympus Mons is located at 19.5 degrees south of the Martian equator.
Interesting.
And then you go ahead and look at Jupiter, and it has its great dark spot, and it's at 19.5 degrees, let's say north of its equator. I'm not sure which one. But then there's Saturn that has its great red spot, or whatever. One of them has a great dark spot. One has another spot on it. Anyway, that one is 19.5 degrees south. So one of them's north, one of them's south. But these are the placements of them in relation to their global equators. Now, if that weren't enough of an observation, the sun, each and every single time it has a solar flare, it is either 19.5 degrees north or comes from 19.5 degrees south, somewhere of the solar equator.
That's very intriguing.
So, all this fear-mongering maybe perhaps is what it is, because if you know where the solar flares, what angle from the equator they're coming from, right, the distance from the equator as far as 19.5 being, and when I say 19.5, I mean like from the equator You can go 19.5 degrees north or south in latitude, and it's exactly 19.5. And um, so yeah, maybe perhaps this is some kind of, you know, Stargate, as you were suggesting, but I don't know. All I can say is that from the information that I've studied and researched and gathered, um, things like that are very interesting, at the very least.
Well, I'm wondering.
Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I most agree. I'm wondering with the launch of, um, oh man, I think it was Columbia. It was about the time before my birth or at my birth or something like that. In '86.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that was actually at 19.5 or it was a different degrees point then.
Isn't that the one that exploded?
Yes. 1986.
Yeah, Columbia. Yeah, shuttle Columbia. But look at it. What's the name? It was Columbia. There's just a lot of weird stuff. So also on that, if you want to get conspiracy theory-ish with me here, um, a bunch of those astronauts are still alive.
Ooh, that's intriguing.
As a matter of fact, you can find videos where there are um, side-by-side comparison photos of them on YouTube, with people who look exactly like the person, with a little bit of aging and graying and all that, maybe some weight, but identical pretty much. And some of them are using different names, but some of them have exactly the same names.
Really?
And are like and are teaching at like universities and shit like that.
So is that a possibility of a shift of dimension, or is that a
I have
possibility of
I'm not I'm not speculating on that. I'm just saying that's a curious bit of information.
right?
You know,
I mean,
it's
that's
because
there's so many different rabbit holes that can go down. That's like okay,
right.
there's a glitch in the matrix. Number one. Number two, that's time shift that we saw and witnessed something, but yet then they were saved by what extraterrestrial,
Yeah.
and then of course it had to be all covered up and hush hush back then, and they were safely brought back down because it was a stupid error in mankind. Wouldn't that be something?
Huh.
That
Who
I
knows?
never thought of that. That
Um,
or doppelganger, which they say that everyone has a doppelganger here on the planet.
yeah, I've seen them. Um, but so again, those are some very interesting things. So all from this title of Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion and Subquantum Kinetics. My friend Vlad came on and we had an interesting conversation about feminism. And then you came up here and we, you know, talked about
And
um,
anti-gravity quantum.
archeo, archeo, archaeoastronomy,
Right.
um, solar flares, secret mission
Where
from
where
NASA in 19.
where were you going with the secrets of anti-gravity propulsion?
I was going to talk about the secrets of anti-gravity propulsion, which is the title of a book by Paul Elo Violette, who's a PhD um, a researcher, studier, physicist who has developed something called subquantum kinetics, which is an ether physics that describes and talks about and explains certain things like um, uh, superluminal travel um, and and so many things involving the rethinking of physics for show that he basically says Einstein got it all wrong, and he challenges a lot of things in physics. Actually, as a matter of fact, I had some brief uh, um, interaction with him, correspondence with him, when I was buying a copy of one of his updated editions of his book. Because I have a couple hard copies of his book, Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion. Um, one of them I'm always leaving them everywhere for people. One is in California, one is in China, but fortunately there are digital copies. So I was buying one, and anyway, as I was doing that, I found that he does some updates on his website, which I believe is called the Starburst Foundation. And
I've heard of that.
he, yeah, and he shows that at least at the last time I looked, which was a year ago or so. No, it was no, it was about 3 years ago. And he was putting up that he had 14 a priori predictions about physics that have now been proven true by physics. So he predicted things, and they've come to light in physics. One of them was the the discovery that you can use a Turing wave model to to model how energy and frequency is distributed across an electron. And that may be completely incorrect in many ways, but I do know that he's applying something having to do with Turing to the frequency distribution across some particles. But I haven't looked at the research for a while. But I do know that several of the things, when I looked and cross-checked, they turned out to be true. He also has published in his book several letters that he's made to several government organizations, including NASA, with ideas about how to improve propulsion and several things that he's discovered in his ideas, only to just kind of be, kind of pat on the head and be like, "You're a good boy. Yeah, thank you for bringing this to our attention. We already know about this, this, and that. And we're doing this, this, and that." So kind of, dismissive. But I haven't looked at any of his updates for a while. But now that I'm reanalyzing his work, it's something that I have already scheduled in my media research planning. So I just haven't done it yet because I was
No worries.
going to go. Yeah, I was going to go over some of the surface things that I understand about anti-gravity propulsion and its relation to subquantum kinetics, and also let what happened with you to just kind of freely speculate about all of this, high concept sci-fi rigmarole.
Right, right.
Which is just a line from Rick and Morty. Is Morty's dad said that.
Yep. Rick and Morty is like,
anyway.
it's a funny show, and it's like, oh my god, I can't believe they just said that. But okay.
But it's also really awe-inspiring and eye-opening. It's just because of the fact that it's a cartoon and a ridiculous one at that, with just
it's like the next
really
Beavis and Butthead
antics.
kind of thing, really.
Yeah, but it's way beyond that because of the really it's high concept sci-fi rigmarole. I mean, it's
Right.
really great.
Right.
So yeah, and that, I mean, every time I think about subquantum kinetics and this stuff, I start to then think about, because I love when people come up with these complicated sounding names for things because they want to sound all sciencey. And I've been doing the same thing for years, and I think that it's hilarious when I do it. People don't know, because I don't talk about it a lot. I mean, I say it when I say it, like now, but I don't go out and be like, "Hey, I'm doing this because it's all tongue in cheek, and I think that this is funny." I just do it.
Right.
I've just been doing it for years.
Right.
Because also I also understand how impressive it looks to some people and how it catches attention, and you kind of need that sometime in order to get people having different conversations than the ones that they may be having that are not serving them. And so, believe it or not, having conversations about anti-gravity propulsion and different types of physics tends to lead a lot of people into metaphysics and understanding of the spirit and themselves and different things like that. So
right.
It inevitably happens in today's culture, and everybody wanted to.
I'm almost thinking with the anti-gravity slash propulsion stuff. If we were ever to create that, I think that there's actually a warp of space and time, because supposedly there's really no matter out in space, but then they say that there's black matter out in space, and I don't think we have the technology yet to discover what really is floating out in space yet. And
it seems to be a little contradiction.
Right. And
Question: did I suddenly get louder?
You suddenly got quieter, and then now you gotten louder.
Okay.
You've kind of filtered out a little bit and then came back and filtered out and came back.
Yeah, it's weird. I think I need to change my microphone.
Either that or it's just the connection to the internet.
No, I think this microphone is trying to clip my voice, but it's okay. If I do this, it might sound better.
Yeah, you're farther away.
Okay, so that's farther away. Let's see this. Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion and Subquantum Kinetics presented by Hakeem-Ali-Bocas-Alexander and
Now you're getting closer.
Chris.
Yeah,
All right, how
closer.
about this, Chris?
Better.
All right, yeah, I just gotta, always figure out that microphone placement. Anyway, so yeah, it's a good thing to, change the thinking and to allow it to bring you to different places in your mind, and just these types of ideas do that for me for some reason. And I do these titles and stuff like that. Like I said, ontological mathematics comes to mind when I start thinking of subquantum kinetics, just because it's just a mouthful. Ontological mathematics, subquantum kinetics, hemispheric synchronization. It's just like I just love, it's the use of the Greek and the Latin, which most of the English language is made of. Mostly anyway, it's on this Germanic backbone with all this Latin and Greek heaped upon it, especially in the medical and scientific literature. But almost every single word is identical. It's just,
can you give a definition of quantum?
yes, quantum is a discrete energy packet. So, for example, a really good and clear example of this is that, let's say uh, a, protium, which is actually hydrogen. Hydrogen, when in its most natural form, has one electron orbiting its nucleus of a proton, a single proton, and it has a certain energy shell that it's in, and it's at the highest energy level, which is closest to the proton. And that's, I think, at like 13.6 negative electron volts. I'm not exactly sure now. Again, I haven't looked at it for a while, that type of information.
Wow.
But
13 something?
13.6 electron volts.
That's basically what an alternator does for a battery in a car.
Really?
13.6 is usually what you're charging on your battery.
Okay.
That's interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
So, but I could be wrong about that number, but it is 13 point something. Anyway, the point is that there are various shells and different energy levels that the electrons can occupy. And there are photons coming, there are hydrogen atoms just flying around in the air all the time, right? All over the place, everywhere. Hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe, according to physics reports and what people say to us that report science to us, right? They say that hydrogen is the most abundant. And so with that, then that hydrogen atoms are then getting hit with photons of all kinds all the time,
right,
from the sunlight.
Right.
But nothing is happening to most of these hydrogen atoms. Some of them, though, are, because they have one electron. Sometimes just the right photon hits that electron with exactly 13.6 electron volts and frees that electron from that proton. It gives it enough energy to escape, meaning what it does is the photon gives it enough positive energy to escape the grip of that 13.6 closest to the nucleus.
So it's the magnetic pole, basically. It pushes it off the magnetic pole between
Right, because it makes it less negative.
Right.
Because electrons are negatively charged and the proton is positively charged. So the less negative it is, the less attraction it has to that proton. But this is quantum. Quantum is a discrete packet of energy. And so in this case,
that sounds like I don't mean to, I got to stop and talk real quick. That almost sounds like what you just described was the negative and positive side of thinking. If oneself thinks one thing, whether it be good or bad, you're having that battle in the quantum level in your own self,
Yeah,
basically, because our brains are made up
sure.
of electrons and neurons and all that stuff that are actually impulse firing of electricity.
Well, yeah, I think that if somebody wanted to understand more about just all of existence as we know it from a physical perspective, that I would suggest studying electrons and photons almost exclusively, or studying electrophysics, or even electroquantum or quantum electrodynamics, like that was created by Richard P. Feynman. Um, he's got several great books about the subject. I mean, I don't know if you, I mean, I have a little bit of background in physics studying, but not much, but enough to I have enough tenacity to sit with a book that he wrote that's only like 50 something pages long and spend like a year figuring out what it means. Um, so, but anyway, those two things, photons and electrons, people can figure out pretty much almost all the processes that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. Like, just going off on a little tangent here, for example,
Go,
our
yeah, go.
our metabolic process, wherein we eat C6H12O6, which is glucose, and breathe in O2, which is oxygen, and we also take in H2O, uh, water. Um, but the interesting thing about this, so we take in uh, glucose and oxygen, for example, and in our body we bring those things, we break it apart for the energy. So that's what calories are. It's literally a little tiny explosion in the mitochondria, which are the powerhouse of the cells. Well, the processes that go on with mitochondria, specifically with glucose and oxygen, because you need glucose and oxygen together to have this interaction of releasing that energy. But the energy that's released um, in this metabolic process in most animals is you get heat, which is photon energy, aka light. You get um, carbon dioxide, and you get water as a result of the metabolic process from consuming and metabolizing glucose and breathing in oxygen. So you get carbon dioxide, water, and light. So now you take those three things, water, light, and carbon dioxide, and guess who eats that? Plants. Plants take in carbon dioxide, H2O, and photons.
I was just gonna say that.
And inside their um, photoreceptor cells, specifically the ones in something, their photosynthetic cells, they take specific frequencies of photons, and they take the carbon dioxide and the H2O and the sunlight, and they put those together and make C6H12O6, which is glucose, and then they also expel oxygen in that process, which then comes back to us, and it's a cycle, right? So um, they take in the water, the light, and the carbon dioxide, and they put out sugar and oxygen. And we take in sugar and oxygen, and we put out light, water, and carbon dioxide.
Well,
And so we just have this.
that is a mutual uh, uh, existence right there.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful cycle. Part of that's the Krebs cycle in the human body. But anyway, so those kind of things with electrons and photons are everywhere. I mean, and it's in almost all the health science, but people won't know it if it's not pointed out. For example, you'll hear a lot of talk about antioxidants and free radicals, for example. Again, a simple case of photons and electrons. Specifically, electrons we can talk about in this case, and free radicals, which are dangerous, are simply uh, when there's an imbalance of electrons. So, for example, if you have a molecule, which of course is made of several different atoms, and this molecule is stable as it is. Let me just go a step further and just give another example
Sure.
that a lot of people can relate to. Um, people who are more pigmented, darker skinned people, people like myself with brown skin or darker,
Mm-hmm.
um, have a very peculiar molecule that is one of the very few molecules that are surrounding and protecting the DNA of our cells. So it's one of the few molecules that's allowed, if you will, to be close to the DNA in the cell, surrounding and protecting it. Surrounding and protecting it from what, you ask? Well, thanks for asking. Let me tell you. Protected from photons. This is what people are so concerned about when we talk about UVA and UVB. Of course, UV meaning ultraviolet.
Right.
And ultraviolet is simply another frequency of light, of photons. Like it may come from the sun and other places.
Right.
But you see, if we think about quantum, the question you asked, what was my definition of quantum? We think of quantum again. We can think of them like little tiny packets or balls, right? And so, or like we can think of them as very tiny. A lot of physicists use billiard balls or pool balls as an example. So you got these tiny balls flying around all over the place. These packets of energy, these spheres of light, and they're bombarding our bodies when we're out in the sun. And what are we to do? Well, everyone has, for the most part, uh, the pigment known as melanin around their nucleus of their cell. It just so happens that darker skinned people have a lot more, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And in the same way, where it's not suggested that you wear darker clothes when it's sunny and hot outside because darker colors absorb the light. The same thing is the job of melanin. It absorbs errant photons from being able to strike the electrons around the DNA. Because if this were to happen, and that particular DNA molecule were in the process of mitosis or some other cell division process, then if it gets an electron knocked off, this is essentially what a free radical is now you have an imbalanced molecule or atom that's missing an electron, and so it can't do its job properly. So the proteins can't fold properly, or the process of mitosis cannot occur properly because this one atom has an electron missing, and so its energy is imbalanced, and it's kind of like a tug of war, and some side got like lost a man or lost a team member, and so so it becomes imbalanced. The tug and the pull in here becomes imbalanced, and this can, not always, but it can cause what we know as mutations, meaning it's a variant, and usually an unwelcome variance in the way that the cell has now reproduced itself. And if this is like a skin cell, well, then when that one splits, it's gonna make another mutant cell, and so on and so forth, and then therefore you have skin cancer because you have all these mutated cells that are growing, but they're not serving a proper purpose because they're not shaped the same way. They don't fit in the same way, like a set of Legos. They're supposed to snap in together so that they can exchange blood and different nutrient materials and all kinds of stuff, and the whole microbiome of all the billions of and zillions of critters that help us to survive symbiotically. Um, and so that's one example again of quantum, is that they're all just little packets, but you have to have the right packet of energy to have some influence, because if you have an electron on a hydrogen atom that has 13.6 or needs 13.6 negative electron volts to be freed completely from um, that electron, uh, if you don't have that, it's just going to bounce off of it. Or in some
Mm-hmm.
cases, if it's less, because there's different shells, because you can bounce from 13.7 to the next one, which is, I don't know, let's just say it's 7.4.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it is, and it could even be 13.7. I have no idea, but there are different shells. So one thing that can happen is that the electron can have what's known as a quantum leap, and a quantum leap is when it
Great
goes from
show.
one.
Sorry. Great
Yeah,
show.
is a great show on time travel. Yeah, and so when it goes from a quantum leap from a lower electron shell to one that's higher, that's called a quantum leap. But eventually, what happens is that electron will re uh, distribute that photon that came in the exact same energy that went in to get it to the higher level. And then what happens to it is it jumps back down to where its original state, to where it was before. And so quantum leaps don't happen that long. It's like it takes that energy, it does what it needs to do at that other level, and then it goes back down to where it was before, where its home is. And so all of these are quantum processes, and those were, that's what a quantum process basically is. That's one of the most easily explainable quantum processes, I think. And it's just about energy exchange. If you just think about it, like if you know those blue, well, let's see, racket balls, right? Or any of those balls that have like that it's just bare rubber,
Right.
not like a tennis ball that's fuzzy, or a
Right.
baseball that has like all, right? So
A
it's a
lot of fun
bouncy
playing.
ball.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so imagine if that was just sitting on the ground, or even just imagine one of those sitting on the ground. And then you take another one of those and you throw it at that ball, like straight down, you drop it on it. Well, it's going to hit that ball and somehow cause it a little bit of bounce and cause it to displace somewhere, either left or right, just depending on how it's sitting, or maybe just straight back up as it bounces right back into the other one.
Right.
But that's kind of what happens with these things, is that they bounce into other objects, and either they deflect off of it or they get absorbed into it, and then the particle that absorbs it does something different for a little while, like makes a quantum leap, and then releases that energy and then goes back to doing what it was doing before. So it's like, hey, what's up? It catches this thing, it goes, and it's like, look, I got it. It was funny, the idea that just popped into my mind. It's like somebody who wins the lottery, or like gets like a bunch of money from somewhere, like a big tax return or something like that.
Right.
And so then all of a sudden they're like living this high life for a little while, and then they spend all that money, and then they're right back where they started
Yep.
from again.
They're right back, right from the beginning.
So that's it's a quantum leap, and that's a quantum process. So anyway, that was a long way to answer your question.
that was a lot of information, a lot of knowledge right there. It's good though.
But quantum world is interesting. I have no idea what's going on, but it's just fun to pretend that I do.
Well, yeah, I think you're pretty much right on the right track. I wouldn't say that. No, you're not. That would be ignorant to say that. But it sounds very truthful to me, and it's very simple explained.
But I'm not.
I haven't studied it, so I can't say yes or no or any. You know what I mean?
But the thing is that I take liberties with my examples, but the examples are true to the processes. I may not have the exact same numbers that I need, but those don't matter to understand what's happening. And that's the heart of, I think, theoretical physics, if I'm not mistaken, is that I can understand the concepts and ideas, and I can even maybe come up with some that may be useful to attempt to be tested or not, but I don't dabble that much into the mathematics of it.
Well, here's a question for you. In your study of field of what we were talking about earlier a while ago, I don't remember when that was, but we were talking about the hypnosis, right?
Yes, sir.
So in that regards, the hypnosis of what you have studied and you do know to be true, and now looking at the quantum level of what you've just described, how much coincide do they actually intertwine to each other?
That's a very interesting question.
I thought it would be.
Well, they have a very clear connection to me, and in that, because of the fact that I learned from a gentleman named Lee Spusta, who works at the Hypnosis Motivation Institute, where I got a degree in clinical hypnosis in Tarzana, California. He has a little more than a little information and knowledge about binaural beats. And he has his own production called Cymatics, where he creates these different sound healing energy designs that you can use for meditation and hypnosis and all. all kinds of things like that. But they're based uh, on the brainwave frequencies, which can be detected electromagnetically through various medical devices that have been tasked
Equipment,
for
yeah.
use, yeah, like MRIs and
Right.
electroencephalographs and things like that. So you can detect the brain waves, which have been very imaginatively labeled gamma, beta, alpha, theta, and delta. And I said that in the order of the highest energy to the lowest. And the reason why they're, like, for example, you have alpha is the hypnosis, daydreaming, relaxation, meditations,
So
frequency.
that's the highest at that point.
No, sir.
Oh,
First one that was identified, which is why it has alpha. The second one that was identified is the brainwave we know as beta, which is when people are wide awake. The next one will be gamma, which is the highest one. Then there's theta, and then there's delta. Now, again, I'm not sure if that's how they organized the um, the labeling of them, but when I said that, I was saying, no, sir, I think this is how I think they organized it, because I do know that with like thermodynamics, they have this thing called the zeroth law,
mhm.
which came after the first and second. So they're like, oh, we have the first law of thermodynamics and the second law of thermodynamics, and then they discovered something else, and so they decided to call it the zeroth law of thermodynamics, to put it in its place, sort of like a prequel. They're like, oh, we got 1 and 2. Wait a minute, here's this prequel.
And so
So,
that becomes before 1 and 2 then.
right, yeah, it's becomes like a more of a foundational a law.
So
Um,
they don't know exactly if alpha state is the highest state, or they do.
oh
I'm
no,
I'm
this is
curious.
known. It's not the highest state. So what I just said, I named them in order of the highest to the lowest, which is gamma, beta, alpha, theta, and delta in the brainwave. So the
Oh, okay,
highest is
okay,
gamma,
okay, okay.
right?
And
And they
gamma,
call that like the,
what state is gamma? What state would that be considered in as the human body, if you don't mind me asking?
well, and the human body, I'm not exactly sure what people would do with this kind of mental energy, but we're going to hold that just for a moment while I take a break and let Chris take a sip of water or something. I'm going to do the same, and then I'm going to let you boot yourself out of here and come back on so we
Sure.
can continue our conversation
Thank
because
you. Thank you.
you're down to a minute 30. Yeah, and so do that, get some water, whatever, and I'm gonna
I'll be right back.
prepare my little diatribe here. Yes, sir. All right. That's Chris. Vlad, I saw you had called back in here earlier, Vlad. I don't know what you were trying to talk to me about. I'm gonna take this call from Matt real quick before you come back, Chris. Um, and yeah, this is Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion and Subquantum Kinetics. Hello, Matt.
Yeah, well, hello. I just tuned in. It's an interesting topic, and yeah, you named the brainwave frequencies in the correct order.
Yes,
Um,
sir.
yeah, and I'll just, you know, the gamma frequency. A lot of times it can be associated with like really high creativity, ideas, high artistic abilities, things like that. But what do you want to talk about in terms of anti-gravity and propulsion systems and subquantum kinetics? I have an interest in quantum physics, and I like science. I got my degree in computer science. I actually had a NASA scholarship. I went to the JPL laboratory. I dig that sort of stuff, and I also have for decades studied UFOs. Well, I wouldn't say studies. I would say I have an interest in them, and I keep apprised of it. And I think that it seems kind of obvious that if those those craft, if we're going to think about those being non-human craft or even human craft or reverse engineered or whatever, that they have anti-gravity propulsion mechanisms, and that's how they can go 8,000 miles an hour or 12,000 miles an hour, and they're not subject to the G forces that would,
Yes.
kill a human occupant or even an alien occupant. So
Right.
they're like in a little bubble of uh, that's insulating them and also providing anti-gravity at the same time.
Yeah, the science
Uh,
behind subquantum kinetics and anti-gravity propulsion actually proposed that exact situation that you are talking about, and the science is very clear on what they're proposing. I'm using a term right now from Star Trek, the remake of the movie, um, but there was a scene in there where they talked about something called an external inertial dampener. External
right, right,
inertial dampener. So the problem with close to speed of light or any travel, we can't even get anywhere near that with human beings, is because of inertia. And because that's what they know as the G-force. So the
right,
faster you're going, you get the force equivalent of gravity pushing against you to the point that if you get to a certain speed, it will literally crush and then liquefy the human body if it keeps going faster. So utterly destroy and disintegrate once you start getting up to these really high speeds. And so this, of course, as many people might know, why astronauts have to go through rigorous training, including being put into something that's like a centrifuge where they have to spin down, be spun around to be able to
right.
experience and get their bodies used to the G forces. So, um, but now in
Mhm.
anti-gravity propulsion, the the mechanism at work, I can explain it simply, but I'm not going to get into the deeper science of it just yet, also because I don't want to make any blunders in explaining it too much. But the basic idea is that when you use capacitors and you charge them with very, very high voltage, um, and for example, um, if you, so let me just back up a little bit. Um, and just to explain, the gravity that we feel, most of us feel it as an attractive force, and that's what we feel as gravity. And just like other forces, subquantum kinetics proposes that gravity has an opposite. And so, just like you have a north and a south on a magnet, you have a plus and a minus. You have positive and negative, right, with electricity. So the negatives repel each other, the positive and negative attract. So like repels and opposites attract in the case of physics. And so gravity also supposedly has an opposite. And what we normally experience is the falling, like you would fall into a well. And so they call this gravity a gravity well. And when this other type of gravity that's used, for lack of a better term, as propulsion, because it's not actually a propulsion in accordance with Newton's third law of motion, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. It's not this type of propulsion. And so, but anyway, what happens is that when you are able to charge a capacitor to on one end of a vehicle, for example, to be giving mostly electrons, it will push away from 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 that direction. That's like a propelling force forward. However, you can do the same thing to the other to that same end of that vehicle and make it be highly charged with positrons, which are the exact opposite of electrons. So you can make it exactly positively charged because it's a
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. So, if we just, for example, suppose for a thought experiment that there's higher intelligence craft, and or there could be humanity developing these kind of crafts. Doesn't matter. Um, the way they would work is exactly how you described, to where on, let's say, the front side of the ship in the direction it's flying or craft is
Matt,
sort of like a.
I just want to make something clear. I'm not describing it. I'm retelling from research that was done by Paul A. LaViolette from his book called Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion, just so we're clear. I'm not, yeah,
Okay.
it's a little bit different from a description because it's not my idea. I just want to make sure you know that. Um, yeah,
Right.
okay.
Okay. Well, thanks for clarifying. So, Yeah, the way that would make sense to work is, let's say, on the front side of the ship of the direction you were traveling would be like a magnet that's pulling you in that direction, and on the opposite, the backside would be pushing you or propelling you. So, like you said,
Yes, sir.
you know, positive on the front, negative on the back, or vice versa, so that it's sucking you in one direction and pushing you in the same direction at the same time.
Precisely.
Uh,
And that cancels
right,
out the inertial force, or it dampens the it dampens the inertia. And
right. So then inside this bubble or inside this craft or whatever, you're not feeling the effects of inertia, the effects of gravity, etc. You're in this bubble as if you're imagine like you're floating on the space station where you're in zero gravity and there's no downward force, there's no upward force, no left or right. You're just neutral, right? And
right,
at the same time, you're able to in a way, sort of overcome the traditional limitations of physics as we've developed them so far with, for example, if you're in a jet airplane and you're going 1,200 miles an hour and you turn right real hard, you're going to go through 6 Gs and black out, right? So this
right.
overcomes these issues, right?
Yes. And also the stress that could be caused in the vehicles itself, of course. So,
Right, right. And and I don't know if you're talking about human-made craft or extraterrestrial craft, but that there is a whole lot of
I'm
reporting of
just talking about the
USOs,
just talking about the
right?
technology in
But they're
general.
okay. So, but if you look at USOs instead of UFOs, instead of flying objects, unidentified submersible objects, these things apparently, a lot of reports fly right into the ocean, right into the water. They don't even slow down, and that would be because they're sort of in this bubble, I guess is a way to imagine it, where they're totally protected and isolated from all those forces. So whether it's going into the water or through the air, or through space or whatever, it's like they're in their own bubble, and that insulates it from, yeah, it insulates the craft, it insulates the occupants, and wild stuff, right?
Yeah, I've always found it fascinating just because, you know, I'm an adventure motivated person, and I would love, like, I had this thing that I said years ago, like, I would love for all the technology to be used for making it possible for people to be able to uh, have lunch and be able to look out the side of their window and see the rings of Mars careening or the rings of Saturn careening by them. You know, it would be such a fascinating thing if we stopped blowing each other up and using technology for all these horrible things on Earth, that if we use them for adventure and exploration, it would be such a different motivation by people. But alas, it is what it is.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thought, and also you could go into things about energy production or free energy or whatever, and how much that would do for the planet Earth and the environment, and helping out people in terms of money and economy and inflation and all that. And I don't know what your thoughts are, or knowledge or things you've heard about, but it seems like we there's a lot of people that say we probably have that technology, but it's being withheld
Sure,
from humanity. And that's a really sort of sad thing, right? Because
it is.
we we got that stuff, and it could transform the planet, it could transform societies, it could transform each individual's experience, and somehow it's being withheld,
Well,
right?
some people tell of breakaway civilizations. Have you heard of this?
Well, and you mean that originated here and went elsewhere, or were elsewhere and came here, or
Yes.
both?
Um,
Because yeah,
partially a little bit of that. So Earth,
yeah,
Earth originated uh, humans, Earth-based humans, who discovered advanced technology through various means. Uh, and there are several factions of this who have done things like, for example, explored every single planet in the solar system and beyond into other galaxies, um, and have these types of vessels, which, for example, may lead to an idea that the so-called UFOs or UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, is what the military likes to call them now, are actually human manned or human driven or controlled vehicles, and um, that these are part of this breakaway civilizations, and they have, different agendas, and they're using the technology, and they have underground bases and all this. The hollow earth comes into mind, and all these other different kind of theories that are
sure,
going on. But I mean, look at what is presented even in three movies immediately come to mind that are presenting so-called conspiracy theories. One of them is the newest movie with Halle Berry called Moonfall, in which they discover that there's an alien intelligence inhabiting the moon, which is actually a spaceship. Now, I think his name is Jim Mars, but he published a book called Our Mysterious Spaceship Moon, and that talks about the exact same thing, that it's hollow, that NASA actually crashed satellites into it, and it rang like a gong, like a bell for 6 hours, and it shouldn't do that if it's not hollow, and so many different things
right,
like that. Another movie that comes to mind that brings like these conspiracy theory types of things to light and shows that they're true is, or just puts it in our faces, a little bit before that, is the Godzilla versus King Kong movie, where King Kong was living in the Hollow Earth. That's where he came from, and that's like his original home, away from Skull Island.
oh, right,
And then
right,
another movie is Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skulls, where they find these perfectly formed crystal skulls that have no sutures and no cracks or anything like that, or should be broken because of the different fissures that are in them, but they're perfectly smooth with no imperfections on the surface or anything like that. And then, they bring him back to this temple in South America somewhere, and then it turns into this interdimensional or portal that takes him into space. And so, you've got a lot of this stuff that kind of is just thrown in our face. I mean, even, like there's this one movie I really love is a comedy called Paul. And what's really interesting is, this gray alien breaks out from some, government lab, and he's trying to get home, and I remember one of the name of the agent in that movie. His name was Lorenzo Zoil. And what's interesting about that is that there's an actual a life-saving product called Lorenzo's oil, but it's Lorenzo's oil. It's an oil. And but this guy called himself Lorenzo Zoil, and
oh,
I think that that is a fucking fantastic nod to something that a lot of people should know about. And I may go off on a tangent about that. Do you want to know about Lorenzo's oil?
yeah, I do, and I love tangents. So yeah, go ahead.
Lorenzo's oil. So there's a movie by the same name that was written by uh, a medical doctor who also turned screenwriter. And so no, now is that David Mamet, or am I thinking about somebody else? Anyway, um, David Mamet, I think he wrote Red Belt. He practices jujitsu. He might be a physician, and he may or may not have done. There's a movie called Lorenzo's Oil, and so the basic story is there's a boy named Lorenzo, and he's stricken with a disease called ALD, which stands for adrenoleukodystrophy. It's one of the 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 demyelinization diseases, like multiple sclerosis and things like that, where it eats away at the myelin sheaths. And people, doctors don't know why. They say it's autoimmune.
Right,
Why is this happening? Well, uh, Michaela Adoni and I forget what Lorenzo's father's name is right now, but she was a teacher, and he worked for the World Bank. Anyway, there's the diagnosis, because their son started getting sick, and usually within 2 years of diagnosis, because the symptoms that the children are having are not something you can ignore, and so they get taken to the doctor, and usually 2 years after diagnosis, they die. Well, Lorenzo's parents were determined to not let this happen, of course, as any parent would want to save the life of their child, but they happened to be in positions where they had the resources. Like I said, the father was, worked for the World Bank, and the mom was a teacher at a university nearby. Um, and so they went to work and researching. She went to the library every day. They took turns doing research, and what they came up with is basically they discovered a mechanism that was causing the demyelinization in these children, um, and they discovered the mechanism at play is something called competitive inhibition. And so basically, the fatty acids that people take in from their diet, or in this case, Lorenzo, whatever he was eating, these enzymes would elongate fatty acids into very long chain fatty acids. Um, and there's saturated fats, and there's different ones that are good and ones that are bad. Anyway, in the case of children who have, and they're usually boys who have adrenoleukodystrophy, I think it might be, it's a sex-linked genetic disease. I think it's passed down from mother to child, but it only affects boys. Diseases are very strange in how they do things like that, by the way. It's interesting. It's also interesting how women, by the way, another tangent side note, did you know that the mitochondrial DNA is the only DNA that's passed down without any editing in its exact form from a mother to her children?
No, I didn't know that.
But
That's
but it can
fascinating.
only be
Yeah.
passed down from women in the exact form. If a woman has a son and he has children, then that mitochondrial DNA gets changed. But if she has a daughter, but only the
Oh,
daughters can
right,
pass down completely
right.
unbroken genetic lines that can be traced through the mitochondrial DNA. So in fact, if we really want to be real about it, women
Mm.
should be the one who give men their last names, because they are the ones who actually pass down the genes in the exact form. Anyway,
Right.
back to Lorenzo's oil. The So what they found was that these fatty acids, because this enzyme was elongating these fatty acids in a bad way, and when those fatty acids get into the body, they eat away at the myelin sheath. And myelin is another fat, so it's um it's a chemical reaction, and where the myelin starts to be degraded by these very long chain fatty acids. However, they found by experimentation that by giving olive oil, um, and rapeseed oil, and then they refined it to very specific erucic acid from rapeseed and oleic acid from olive oil, and gave it in large doses. Those saturated fatty acids, when put into the body, distracted this enzyme from elongating the bad ones. It prefers, for some reason, to elongate the oleic acids and the erucic acid. So while it's distracted by that, it cannot elongate the bad ones, and therefore it halts the disease progression in its tracks. And they discovered this completely by trial and error, because they just researched their asses off and spent all day and night trying to save their son's life. And so they came up with this concoction after they brought it to different doctors who would distill it and get it down to the exact molecules that were needed for this. They created something called Lorenzo's oil, which, um, again, it's something called competitive inhibition, because it was competing
Oh, right, right,
for, and so the competition of putting in these good fatty acids made the enzyme compete for which ones, and therefore it inhibited the elongation of the other ones, which was causing the problems. So yeah.
right. Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah, yeah. I wish I remember the name of the guy. But have that's I listened to a whole talk by him. And this man won the Nobel Peace Prize for longevity. and he was really into olive oil, and he, basically drinks a pint of olive oil a week and has been doing this for 20, 30 years. And it's those healthy fats, which I think are the unsaturated fats, not saturated fats, of olive oil, coconut oil, avocado oil. These are the oils that are good for us, and the omega-3 oils and those unsaturated oils. They're one of three primary macronutrients. Um, so those healthy fats. And he said this about olive oil, and what he said was, and I'm sure maybe he was exaggerating the point, maybe he wasn't.
Matt?
And what he said was, food is really just a carrier mechanism to get olive oil in your body. And so yeah, he was probably exaggerating, but he's like,
Well,
this
I just
guy
want to
would
point out
buy.
something, Matt, that I
Yeah.
believe that olive oil and coconut oil, they are saturated fats. They're just different in their nature, but they are saturated. Yeah.
Different types. Okay. Yeah. So, but they're different than, say, the type of fat that's, in red meat.
Well,
And,
the problem is the when people talk about denaturing, it's like most of the saturated fats, like let's say margarine, is they force hydrogen
yeah,
into the spaces. That's why it's called hydrogenated. And
right,
so that's what makes, and they
right.
saturate it with hydrogen, but it's an artificial saturation, and certain types of saturated fats have um, these problems with hydrogen placements, and so that's why they're bad. So anyway, I apologize for cutting you off. I just, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's okay. Yeah. And I've heard about margarine. It's like one molecule away from being plastic, basically. And, plastic is made from petroleum, which is oil. So, you can imagine that. But going back a ways to what you were talking about, a couple interesting thoughts occurred to my mind. And you were talking about, maybe races or humans going off into space that I guess in a way, it could be a theory of maybe, 2 million years ago, 3 million years ago, mankind evolved to a very sophisticated level, even beyond what we're at today, and left the planet, explored the solar system, etc. And then we had things like the Great Flood, or the big meteor came and wiped out the dinosaurs, wiped out the man, whatever, uh, or certain ancestors, etc. But perhaps at some point, um, there's an alternate version of history where mankind evolved and left the planet, went inside the planet, yeah, Hollow Earth thing, and then there's this other lineage of man that's progressed on a different timeline, a more recent timeline, that maybe we're just getting close to back to how sophisticated and advanced in the technology that we had maybe long ago. And
Matt,
yeah, I what you were saying
are you
about the
sure? Are you sure that you want to go?
no, I'm not sure.
No, I mean, are you sure that you want to go down this rabbit hole with me?
Well, uh, yeah, and uh, well, yeah, we can go ahead. I don't. I do think, generally speaking, that there has been a rise and fall of human evolution and technology over a great span of years that is very different than what they teach us in the public education system. Of that, I'm pretty sure. I think there's
Yes,
evidence to back that up.
I might have to
So
agree with you then.
yeah, I think we've been around a lot longer. There's been rises and falls, and they occurred so long ago. We have very little evidence and remnants and archaeological things to back that up. There are some though, and some of those archaeological things, like I've seen where they found in a 2 million-year-old rock embedded within it, basically a capacitor, that would be used
There,
in. a
are a lot
radio
more.
or a computer or stuff like that. So there might be archaeological evidence of advanced technology that goes back, perhaps millions of years,
Yeah, there are
right?
a whole lot of those things. You know, this gentleman who wrote the book Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion, Paul A. LaViolette, it would be a really good idea for a lot of people to look at some of his other publications, because he not only talks about that, but he's a fascinating person in that his books, like for example, he's got one called Genesis of the Cosmos, the ancient science of continuous creation, or decoding the message of the pulsars, um, uh, Earth Under Fire is another one of his books. So,
Well, you know, the the title itself makes me fascinated and makes my mind reel and makes me want to read it, right? That's just
yeah.
cool right there.
So he and there he draws. I mean, it's amazing. I'm not going to get too much into that now. Maybe at some point in time I'll read some stuff from his books, but he's just it's mind blowing. Like it's not just this anti-gravity propulsion. That's like his main book that he pushes because it's heavily based in physics and science and mathematics. And his other books are as well, but he actually shows how um, astrology and other ancient texts actually show and are compared. He shows side by side comparisons of how they actually show in a sequence of the creation of existence. And going back to what I was talking about, subquantum kinetics, which I'll get to in a second, but I went off on a tangent of Lorenzo's oil simply because of a character's name was Lorenzo Zoil in a movie called Paul about an alien who escaped from a government facility and wanted to get home. And amongst the other movies that I had mentioned that are putting sort of things in front of our faces or kind of mocking the conspiracy theories and everything like that, which may not necessarily be conspiracies, or in the sense that people think about them, like being fake for the most part, because that's what people think of conspiracy theories. They think
Right,
they're made up. 'Cause that's,
right.
yeah.
And I think that's an interesting point, and that made me think of, I think, did you ever wonder maybe the people that are making these movies are putting those things in there on purpose? They're trying to wake us up. They're trying to sort of enlighten us. They're putting some truth in there to be like, hey, I know this is a fictional movie, but I'm going to put some truth in here. So hopefully, I can wake you up or wake humanity up a
No,
little
they're
bit.
fucking with us.
Yeah, well, it's one or the other, right?
Well, look at
you know,
this. There are numbers that pop up all over movies. Now, I could be called a numerologist in some sense of some of the things that I do. And one of the things that I noticed is, for example, let's just look at popular movies, just so because most people would know of these if they could look at it and check for themselves. But in the movie The Dark Knight Rises, there's some scenes leading up to this incident at a football stadium where the mayor of this of the city of Gotham gets killed in an explosion. And right before he gets killed in this explosion, they show the number 322 um, underneath the box, the place where his seat. They show the number 322, and it's like right underneath him or something like that. But it was very apparent that it was being shown. And then there were other numbers in the movie leading up. But the point about that is that around the same time, I believe, like 2000, a few years ago, 13 or 14, a movie came out called Olympus Has Fallen. And that movie came out on March 22nd, I believe, of the year it came out. Now, the one interesting thing that might be obvious to a really crazy conspiracy theorist is that that's the number that you see underneath the skull and bones of the Skull and Bones Society, um, which represents Isis, which represents the Book of Genesis, because the Book of Genesis means the gene of Isis, which comes from her name, which is ostrogene, which is the same thing as testosterone, because estrogen and testosterone are both the names of gods, Isis and Osiris, which are their Greek names. But Oster is Osiris's Egyptian name, and Astra is closer to the original name of her name in Egypt, even though that name is used in Greek for the word for star, which that's what they all are, Oster. As a matter of fact, you can find in an appliance company, and in the O, there's a four-pointed star in the middle of it. It's like they're just mocking us with this stuff or just showing us codes. Who knows what the fuck is going on, but it's very interesting. Um, and so you have the god Osiris, the male god, in your testicles, basically, because it's the male hormone, testosterone. And you have Isis or Astra, oestrogen, in the female hormone, estrogen. Anyway, so the numbers, though, I can go off on these tangents all day. They just fill my mind with madness. Um, but uh, the number 322 before he got killed. So the interesting thing about that is that this number is connected to presidents. The movie Olympus Has Fallen involved the White House being taken over by Korean terrorists who flew over and overthrew the White House and killed pretty much everybody in there and took the president hostage. And Olympus is the president, so Olympus has fallen. And it's just interesting, these connections. Like, you have a political figure in Batman being killed with the number 322 seconds after that. It's a number that has been associated in conspiracy theory circles for years with the Skull and Bone Society that George Bush and several other people supposedly came from. And there's images going around with 322 underneath there. The connections to the Bible and ISIS and all other stuff like that, which is March 22nd, which is down, the, there's different, you have, that's the spring with the vernal equinox, because Isis and her counterpart goddesses all over the world, which go by names like Easter, Esther, Aster, Astro, Asterisk, all those star names, uh, Ether, all of that stuff is all where is the birth of all things. Ether, even ether physics like subquantum kinetics, ether, Esther, estrogen, Aster, East Star, even oyster, West Star, even in Spanish, oeste, este, all of these things are point to Isis, but uh, I don't want to upset, just people get religious about that stuff. Anyway, um, so the number 322. So that's one example of why I say, like, it's just being put in our face, and like, what's the point of all that? Why release a movie about the president being kidnapped and the White House being taken over on 322, and then showing a and again, this what I'm talking about right now is way far off anything else that I've said before, because the other things at least are grounded in science and mathematics. This is um, it's high concept sci-fi rigmarole. Is what I could say. It's conspiracy theory stuff. It's fun. It's interesting. There's some numerology, interesting stuff behind it. Um, even in adding up those numbers together. Another example of this stuff in movies, which is very interesting, is the movie Skyfall. Is a James Bond movie. There's a scene where, hold on for a second. Oh, it's Chris again. Awesome. Chris is waiting in the queue. Chris, I see you, sir. I'm going to be with you in 1 second. I'm going to tell this story, and we can switch back and forth. I'm enjoying exploring my brain on this stuff. Um, and so in the movie, he's chasing this villain, and this guy is uh, wearing a police uniform, and he gets on the train, and um, you're looking at these train car numbers, and first of all, uh, the guy who's wearing the villain who's wearing the police disguise, I think his hat or on the side of his uniform it has the number 101, like in college, English 101, right? So it's 101, the beginning of the initiation, the opening of knowledge. And then right after that, after he turns and you see that on his shoulder, he walks through a car train door that has the numbers 96669. So it's nine sandwiching the 666 right after you see the 111. It's like, what's going to happen here next? The other interesting connection to that is that Neo in the movie The Matrix, his apartment room door is 101, and right in that scene they show the 101. He goes through the whole thing, and then he sees the white rabbit, and then he goes down the Matrix. He gets, meets Trinity and all that. So there are so many of these things in the movie that they don't tell you about, but they show numbers and things like that. And so when you say, what do I think about this, or is it that? Sometimes I think they're fucking with us. If you say like, why are they putting it in there,
Well,
right?
yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's both. I totally understand what
Whoever
you're
they are, right?
right, right. I totally understand what you're saying, and I think that that stuff is in there where they're kind of fucking with us, and maybe it's some sort of a cult things going on, some sort of Illuminati stuff, whatever. I think that's going on, but I also on the other side, I think there are and
Aliens.
well, no, yeah, of course there's yeah, ancient astronauts say yes, aliens. No, I think on the other side there are a lot of very positive meanings and truths embedded in science fiction and movies that are trying to give people some help. So I think both of those things are going on, and so
Well, all
there's
of it
some that
can be positive, right? Like electricity can cook a man or cook your food, right?
right, or the internet. The internet can control us and spy on us and manipulate
Yep.
things, or it can give us the wisdom app where we can talk to
Yep.
and communicate with each other. So, anything, whether it's technology or whether it's movies or whether it's music or whatever it is, can be, sort of benevolent or malevolent in terms of its intent, its creators, its purposes and reactions. But hey, you got Chris on the line, and I think it's
Yeah.
the same Chris that I've talked to a couple of times,
It
and
is. It is.
he's a
Same
great,
guy.
yeah,
He is.
same guy. He's
I,
he's a
I
great
heard
guy.
you.
So
Yeah, I first
I'm
heard you
gonna,
talking to him before, so I knew it would be a good conversation
yeah,
with you because I heard you talking on his Interstellar Frequency show before. Yeah. Or he called you. One of the.
okay. So let me
Yeah.
click the, yeah, he called into
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
show and
Yeah.
we had great talk, and he
Yeah.
called back. Let me click the leave button, let Chris in here, and let's banter this stuff around for a while.
Matt, it's such a pleasure meeting you. Oh yeah, I'm already following you. Uh, so I'm already following you. I think that's why I already followed you because I heard your conversation with Chris. So that's awesome. It was great talking to you, Matt. That is so amazing. You guys are really cool. Um, for asking me these questions that make me think about this stuff. It's so
Yeah,
funny. Like I have this stuff sitting in my brain, and it's like you guys are just typing in a search engine. Like when you guys
right.
ask me a question, it's like typing in a search engine.
Yeah, you're
It's
you're
like
the
this stuff
new
comes out.
Google, man. New Google.
It's funny.
Hey, Matt, I want to say, hey, it's awesome that you popped up and jumped in over here. That's what we need to do is do like a hour long show or 30-minute long show and change the settings so that way we could just kind of banter back and forth and just keep going instead of that damn time limit stuff, you know.
Well, I don't want to take you away
Oh,
from
no
the
worries.
Wisdom app, but there's a place that I use where all three of us and more people can talk at the same time, of course, respectfully. But I have a little gang that I run around with in these different apps, and we have conversations sometime, and then we use them as planning sessions, like breakout rooms. And then what I'm doing, my thing is I'm just going around from. So anybody listening, here's a secret that I have about building your following and having a gang of people around you whenever you want to. It's called social proof formula, and I'm not going to tell you about it right now. I'll tell Chris and Matt, but I'm not gonna. My team already knows, but I'm going to tell you guys later. It's pretty awesome. Anyway, we go and we speak in these different places sometimes, uh, and then other people like Graciela Moore and Rodney and Cecilia Grace and several other people who use different platforms. I've followed them to those platforms of social audio and things like that, and have found a way to repurpose and even hack these these um, these technologies, these apps, to do some pretty amazing things. Like I was able to open up a clinic online because you're able to have these private spaces with people in these really simple, undistracting rooms. Yeah, you can do like a Zoom talk with one person, but for a person who does a talk-based therapy of clinical hypnosis, I don't need to have video and all this other stuff, especially when you have the ability to put links and stuff into there. But anyway, don't want to digress away from what we're talking about. But Chris, we can talk about how we can like travel through the metaverse and do
No,
some really cool stuff. So,
yeah. Not to derail that or anything like that, but with what Matt had said and how much was talked so far, I almost forgot what the last question was that I had asked you. Do you happen to remember
mm.
what it was?
So,
Let me give you a refresher. So what I had asked you before I had bounced out and got some water and stuff like that. It was about the quantum level of discovery of the gamma, the alpha, and all the other,
yes.
and then
Okay.
how much of that coincides with,
With hypnosis.
yes, of what your knowledge in the hypnosis of the mind and
Yeah.
the brain. How
Okay.
much is that co-aligned with?
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate you recentering that. And I don't know if I really made any connection to like the anything about quantum and the discovery of the brainwave frequencies. Those two things happen completely separately, and people weren't even thinking about it when they were doing those two. But they ultimately, just as everything, have a very intimate and powerful connection. So um, the uh, the idea of the brainwave frequencies and what we were talking about before with like subquantum kinetics and quantum physics and how that relates to hypnosis is in the, or at least I can explain it from things that I currently use and what I'm doing
Sure.
that have to do with uh, altering the mind and using physics to do so, and why and how hypnosis also does that.
Please explain if you don't mind, because this is something that I've been um, wanting to kind of know. So if you don't
Hmm.
mind,
Yeah. So first of all, the definition. So I said this before, but you know, some people may um, start listening to this, whether it's recorded or live at this moment. And so uh, in 2004, I enrolled in a professional school called the Hypnosis Motivation Institute in Tarzana, California, which has the distinction of being America's first nationally accredited college of hypnosis. Um, I believe it was founded in 1967. It's more than 50 years old. It was founded by Dr. George J. Kappas. Um, he's had many accomplishments in the field of hypnosis, including his definition of hypnosis being in the United States Dictionary of Occupational Titles, um, being able to help to found the American Hypnotist Association, which is the Hypnotherapist Union, and a certifying body that is separate from the Hypnosis Motivation Institute. And they are accredited to such a level that they are also recognized by the Department of Education. Of course, you can check out their website because you can only get the EDU designation in such a case. It's hypnosis.edu. Um, but they also have just released an Associates of Psychology program, a mind-body psychology program. And even before that, if you are a physician or a nurse or a psychologist or any medical or healthcare professional that needed to get continuing education credits from, you could go to that school and get them. Whereas a lot of places that teach certain things that might be considered um, metaphysical or alternative won't have such a distinction. I just wanted to make that clear too. So proceeding forward, what I'm talking about is not just me speculating about it, as I usually